Oh, Buzz. Just Bees Book Club. I don't got a copy of the book for today because I listened to it on audiobook. The reading was very good. But today we're going to be talking about Noor by Nnedi Okorafor. Um, this is. Ooh, I forget exactly. I believe this is sort of connected with a few of her other books. I know that she has, she has her explicit trilogies like the Akata, Inspidi scripts, Kata, Witch, Warrior, and Woman. There's of course Binti, the trilogy of novellas that is my absolute favorite work of hers by I was gonna say a mile, but I don't think that's true any longer, having read Noor, but by still a good margin. Um, and then she has like sort of thematically or like loosely associated books that I think Who Fears Death and Remote Control are sort of in the same world, is my understanding. And I don't know if Noor is like crosses over with that, but um, that's not really the point. The point is that this is a really good science fiction book that I quite enjoyed, and the reading is quite good too. It follows a woman named Ao who has uh, cybernetic legs and one arm, I believe, as well as neural implants and stuff like that in a sort of near future Africa. I mean, basically the setup is her fiance has left her and she goes to the market and some shit pops off and she has to go on the run. She is running sort of in the direction of this massive, basically permanent windstorm that's like a number of miles outside of the town that she moved to with her fiance. She runs across a man whose name is DNA, who is like a Fulani herdsman, and they sort of travel together and discover stuff about themselves and each other along the way. One of the things I remember, one of the things that first struck me about it was like it it kind of plays along around with like paratext or in text stories. Like the second or third chapter is just like um, a I guess transcript, I guess read transcript in my case of a fake podcast called the African Future Podcast about the woman who invented this technology that allowed for sort of non-wired transfers of solar power that lose no power in their transmission, and that's sort of the like the big what's there's a name drop for Senza Wanda in here. What's the other Suvin thing? The Novum. I think that's like the Novum um, of the book. The novel science fictional or the novel scientific ish uh, driver of the world building. There's a better definition by Darko Suvin of Novum. It's been like over a decade since I read that essay, and not quite that long, but still quite a while since I was doing any sort of para academic science fiction scholarship like I used to do. But yeah, I did do that, huh? Um, and maybe one day I'll do it again. I think the but yeah, so there's the like second or third chapter is just this like long transcript from a podcast that like AO was listening to when she was in like recovery from a car accident she was in when she was 14 that like lost her the use of her legs, and she was born with physical disabilities as well. So she's like multiply disabled across um, you know it's a genetic circumstance, but this is actually problematized in the book, and like there's a big reveal about that specifically that I guess I don't feel like getting into at the moment. But maybe I will. So spoilers always entirely possible. Um, when I say I don't feel like getting into it, I just don't know that I have anything specifically useful to say about it, more than I'm trying not to spoil things, I think. But my brain works against me all the time, so who knows? Uh, so she's like memorized this whole podcast, and that's why it gets a full thing. And then like two chapters later, she's just met DNA, and they have this like sort of really contentious standoff. And she's like, "Why are you shaking?" and demands him tell her about like what happened with him. And we get another full chapter that's just like the story of DNA is yesterday. And so like I was like, oh, this is interesting. Is this whole book gonna be like a chapter of like action and like character setup via reminiscing, followed by a chapter of like a story within a story kind of thing? Like that's a much bolder structural means by which to tell a story than I think I generally associate with Okorafor. Not to say she's like doesn't ever play with structure, but like I more associate her with sort of straightforward linear narratives that dip back into time as characters would be thinking about those moments. Um, and overall, it ends up being much more like that. But yeah, just from the jump, I was like, oh, there's like formal experiments happening alongside of this interesting world building and character development. This might be my absolute shit, and it turns out it is, but just not for that reason in particular. Um, and just like thematically, it's I've already brought up the disability sort of issues that Okorafor has talked about in interviews and stuff like that. And there was like a TED talk that she gave that got turned into a book that I didn't read because I find TED talks very insipid. Um, Even ones from very smart people due to formatting constraints and assumed audience as much as anything else. But there's like she has a book out about her own disability and struggling with that, and so an informed uh, use of that, and alongside. And it doesn't just exist alongside, but it interweaves with a lot of the book's explicit concerns with colonialism and capitalism, um, with uh, with the sort of obvious and the less explicit concerns about transhumanism. There's a lot of talk about how disabled bodies are viewed um, in in um, in the handful of communities that this takes place across. Um, and I don't think the sort of fundamental ideas or names of transhumanism come up, but it felt like a productive dialogue to intentionally frame AO's issues as being ones that are framed with a disability justice sort of framework rather than a transhumanist framework. Um, Despite certain, I guess where the transhumanism comes up is in certain communities where people are like, why are you changing your body just to like, do you think you're better than God or something like that? Which it sort of speaks more to the experience ostensibly in this world of probably not existing people because of how the medical technology is described as being incredibly painful. But potentially, if this book were to get a couple of sequels that like jump forward in time, one could see the like transhumanists taking up this disability, the sort of transhumanist uh, rich people taking up this technology for their own ends, because it is also explicitly described very thoroughly throughout as these body modifications are things that are really expensive and very painful and extremely helpful in allowing for you know things like mobility and like memory regeneration or you know uh, reconstruction or just capacity is probably actually the word I'm looking for. Like like memory capacity is like a big central thing in AO's story, and yeah, I like I just think it once it sort of moves away from that sort of formal trickery that happens in the first like 4 or 5 chapters, and it starts just being a sort of adventure story basically. Um, I think it is just really well paced. I think it is dealing with issues really well. I don't know. I'm like struggling to talk about anything in this book, other than just like I really enjoyed it, and maybe that's a symptom of having read it a month ago or something at this point, and just not having personal time or energy to sit in front of a camera and talk to Just Bees in this Just Bees book club. Um, but yeah, like I said, I think this is. I still think Binti stands out to me as my favorite Okorafor work that I have read. I've not read all of them. I still need to read Akata Woman, the final in the series. I think it just came out in paperback actually, which is cool. It's yeah, just well plotted. The reading it right after reading Disability Pride, a book I feel like I did not do a particularly good job of talking about here, but that's neither here nor there. Was good to me. It felt good to continue this sort of accidental dive into disability justice and disability politics, um, at this particular moment in my life, that just happens to be supported through what I'm reading, even when I'm not intentionally reading it, which I think is important. I did not know Noor starred a disabled character, um, and yeah, it's just not this isn't quite hit me as hard as the like really breezily written, extremely traumatic, uh, beautifully world built Binti, but like few things have honestly. So that's not a knock on this. It's quite good, and I think it's extremely worth reading, and I'm really glad that there's like a there's kind of a hot straight sex scene in it, which is like not a thing I've encountered a lot in fiction recently. Um, yeah, so that's I don't know. That seems like a no buzz to me, right? Is that what I do here? Is that what this is? Is this what I do? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, hey, I do know that I have to say here. Thanks for not watching.